One night, just after 12 a.m., I found myself logging into Genshin Impact for no particular reason. I was walking around and I suddenly remembered an area in Liyue where I used to go cut bamboo trees. This was something I would do regularly during the COVID pandemic when I needed materials for the Serenity pot. I realized that I had not visited this place in years and I thought it would be a perfect place to wind down after my final exams of university. Almost immediately, I experienced a canon event that was getting rammed by the local boar as soon as the waypoint loading screen disappeared. I had been caught off guard by this simply because I had forgotten that this boar existed in the particular area in this game. As I did my crisp move spin move, I began to think about how much time I spent on Genshin and other video games during the pandemic, when the games offered me something enjoyable to always do when the rest of the world was frozen. As I spent the next 30 minutes wandering through Qingce village, listening to the ambient music and taking in my surroundings, I had somewhat forgotten. I started to reflect, not just on the game itself, but on nostalgia, more specifically, nostalgia in video games. Looking back now, it feels as though life was simpler then. At least for me. I only remember the good stuff, waiting months to spend all my Primo Gems on Eula, or getting a 10-man group to play League of Legends custom games and ARMs.
Can we kill this rat Scion?
Ow!
Who is that? Who is that?
And getting my daily brew with my friends in Town of Salem, just to name a few examples. It all feels distant, but at the same time, I remember those memories like they were yesterday. Back then, I wasn't really happy with my life. I was worried about if I would ever be able to make it, but now I am content with where I am. But one aspect hasn't changed over the years, and that is that I still love video games. I started revisiting some of the games that I played, and those that got me hooked on video games in the first place. Classics like Donkey Kong Country, Mario World on the SNES, side-scrolling beat-em-ups, Mega Man games. Nostalgia is linked to the past, which shapes who we are as people. This gave me the idea to make a video and yap a little bit about this topic as I was a little bit curious. Before continuing, I want to clarify the scope of this section. While researching papers to read for this video, I was unable to access several academic papers through my institution. Additionally, my academic background is not in psychology. I won't go into super detail because anyone can read these papers if they are interested, but my interpretations are based on my own understanding of what the authors are presenting, and my understanding of the material may be incomplete or overlook certain perspectives or ideas that the author might have presented. I will reference the papers I was able to access, and I highly encourage anyone interested to read them and come to their own conclusions. This video is based on my own personal experiences and should by no means represent a rigorous analysis. This little idea or video project, if you will, is from my personal curiosity, and I simply wanted to explore this concept further. Now that this is out of the way, I can continue. It is probably safe to assume that most people have experienced some degree of nostalgia, so we all have a general sense of what it is. That feeling that comes over you whenever you remember or reminisce about something in the past. In 1992, Hirsch describes nostalgia as a bittersweet emotional state. In quotes, a longing for sanitized impression of the past, and notes its fundamentally emotional rather than cognitive nature. This makes sense to me, a feeling that you experience from a memory that makes you happy but sad at the same time. Potentially that sadness comes from wanting to be in that state again or experiencing that memory again. While I don't necessarily agree that the feeling is bittersweet, I can understand where it comes from. I don't always want to return to the circumstance that I experienced in that memory, even if they are powerful. So in that case, I would just call it a sweet experience. Again, this is just my interpretation. There's probably science that refutes this. Either way, I like this quote because it puts into words a clear and concise definition of nostalgia. In addition, the paper notes that nostalgia can be both positive in that one may feel joy remembering meaningful memories, but can also experience sadness for a moment that may never exist again. A common theme that appears with every paper talking about nostalgia is the trigger. It can often be triggered by cues related to objects, music, locations, or any form of media consumption. To me, it seems like anything can cause a trigger for nostalgia under specific circumstances. Nostalgia, Content, Triggers, and Functions was published in 2006 and has been cited over 1,000 times. It explains that nostalgia generally comes from a high emotional memory that is tied to relationships, identity, and personal philosophies such as someone's meaning of life. Repetition alone may not be the cause or trigger for nostalgia. It seems that it is selective, or depends on a case-by-case basis for each person. In that sense, the same game may not have the same nostalgic intensity for different people, and that nostalgia intensity will not appear as high as one may expect it from a certain memory. This paper also notes that nostalgia occurs more often during major life changes, such as growing older, moving, getting into a relationship, etc. And with all this background information to think about while playing the games, I finally began. While it is obvious that more modern titles and games that I played more recently can trigger nostalgia, I thought it would be better to revisit games that I played when I was younger and wanted to see the degree of intensity or nostalgia I would feel while playing these games. I didn't get through all the games I wanted to, but I got the gist of what I wanted to get out of this video by this point. The first game that came to mind was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time on the SNES. I played this game a lot as a kid, and I would often play this game together with some of my family members during family gatherings. My uncle visited from another country recently, and as per tradition, we replayed this game together. We were both surprised by how much we remembered, boss patterns, game mechanics such as rolling barrels or planks, and we instantly focused at those stupid yellow guys that throw those green balls at you. Last time we played this game was before COVID, so we were laughing at how much we remembered about this game. We ended up talking throughout the playthrough about random stuff, just like we would any other game. The nostalgia is clearly related to the shared memories and bonds that both my uncle and I have. During the playthrough, we talked about two games that recently got remakes. I ended up playing both of them. For Little Fighters, the remake was mainly a visual overhaul, while Ninja Warriors added 2 new characters and more combos to some of the older ones. Both games are side-scrolling beat-em-up. I appreciate the effort put into the Ninja Warriors remake. Adding more combos makes the game feel fresh and makes it a lot less button mashy, but in a sense, playing a remake is not the same as playing the original. In all these similar cases, I still remember the general movesets of the characters, and while the games are fun, they didn't really trigger a strong sense of nostalgia, if at all. I could clearly recall specific moments tied to playing these games and the time periods they belonged to, but those memories didn't really have an emotional weight behind them that nostalgia is supposed to carry. I had a similar experience with MegaMan X, which was the next game I tried. As a kid, I struggled with the game on several stages and bosses. Coming back to it now, with many years of gaming experience and a better understanding of Mega Man games as a whole, I was able to get through the game in about 2 hours. I found most hidden upgrades, which made my character feel overpowered. I figured out each boss's weakness, and their simple movesets made the game feel easy and not as punishing as boss fights in modern video games, where it would take multiple tries or even days if we are talking about Souls-like games, to beat a single boss. There was some nostalgia with this game. Walking through the stages, seeing the old art style, hearing the soundtrack, it all pulled me back to my childhood and the SNES games I grew up with. Games like Super Mario World, the Donkey Kong Country series, Aladdin, Battletoads, The King of Dragons, all of which invoked a similar level of nostalgia. But still, none of these games were close to the nostalgia amount I felt while chopping down trees in Chinksa Village. Applying some of the information I gathered from revisiting some of these games, and the research stated by people like Bowman, simply re-engaging with old games wasn't enough to reliably trigger nostalgia to a high degree. We must link the experience to personal meaning or a sense of identity that will be caused by playing a certain game. This matched my own personal experience so far with most of the games I revisited. While I remember specific moments or things about each game, they didn't trigger a strong nostalgic response. Instead, they seemed to function more as a recollection of memories than nostalgia. I took some time to reflect, and I realized that something was missing. Why was it that simply wandering around in Genshin triggered nostalgia, but these older games did not? As I started to play the next game on the list, I started to understand why. Pokémon Platinum was a game I played last a little over a decade ago, much more recent than some of the other games. Either way, I was genuinely excited to return to it. The moment I booted it up and heard the opening theme, I felt nostalgic. I sat there, watching the screen, and listened to the music. It made me realize just how central music is to triggering nostalgia. In hindsight, it's pretty obvious. People listen to music consistently for emotional reasons, for vibes, focus, self-reflection, and many other personal reasons. Music is tied to so many people and their lives. It's no surprise it will trigger nostalgia. Starobinski in 1966 Anderson in 2011, and Barrett in 2010 talk about nostalgia in their papers. They note that nostalgia is triggered by more powerful emotional cues, but as with other papers, it does not trigger nostalgia through familiarity alone. You need that emotional component. There is a mention of neuropsychological studies which show that familiar music can trigger personal memory networks. These link sound directly to someone's past experiences, while nostalgia intensity depends on the listener's personal history with the music. This matches with why sometimes people tell you to study while listening to music. This can help you memorize the material better. In terms of video games, soundtracks or music can evoke nostalgia when they are connected to personal experience. I think every person that played Wii Sports as a kid remembers how great that game was. You could spend hours rotating through the sports with your friends, trying to perfect getting a strike in bowling or keeping a rally going in tennis. Sometimes wishing we could experience those moments for the first time again. All of these memories could simply be triggered by hearing the classic Wii Sports theme. Another personal example is every time I hear the full victory theme or 0 Hour from Overwatch, I get goosebumps and a massive stupid smile on my face. It instantly takes me back to those long nights I spent playing Overwatch instead of sleeping or studying for exams when the game was first released. Even now, scrolling through the comment section of those videos, you'll see that others have a similar nostalgic feeling for the times represented by these songs. Regardless of how they feel about the current game, the music reminds people of the good old days, where they first fell in love with the game. Even if some of these trailers, such as the Overwatch 2 trailer, was only released recently, you still get the same results. People feel nostalgia. In my experience playing video games, I found that titles with a rich and diverse soundtrack tend to evoke a stronger sense of nostalgia. While it is true that games with more music often have larger productions tied to them, with a larger story, more environments to explore, and larger gameplay scopes, but I still think the point still stands. It is easier to become immersed and spend long stretches of time in those games. In that sense, players will listen to the game's soundtracks plenty of times while playing, and the time spent can potentially be correlated to how nostalgic someone feels towards that game. But this isn't always true. With a game like Starcraft Broodwar, which I played from my childhood all throughout high school, I met some of my close friends playing that game during lunch breaks in the film room. It clearly holds personal meaning for me, but I don't feel nostalgia for it, at least not through playing it alone. Watching the cutscenes works a little better for evoking a little bit of nostalgia. However, when I asked my friends, they said they felt very nostalgic for it, more than the other games that they played. It makes sense how the same game can produce very different nostalgic responses for different people. Personally, it is a little irritating that it's difficult to pinpoint exactly why. A little outside the scope of what I wanted to talk about, but the point I'm trying to make is that StarCraft as a whole is a big franchise, and its story has no shortages of worlds, good characters, and good writing. Yet despite the scale, I find myself feeling more nostalgic towards smaller scoped games such as Pac Man World 2 or Viva Piñata. At first, I didn't think I had much of an emotional attachment to these games, yet I still feel a sense of nostalgia for them. They were among the first console games I played. Simply watching playthroughs about them, or even thinking back, feels a little bit different compared to Broodwar. This again highlights that nostalgia is an emotional response that is different for every person. Looking back at the papers, they point out that nostalgia could occur when going through life changes. I played these games around the same time I was moving countries, and I think I subconsciously tied them to that time, which could explain the higher degree of nostalgia compared to Broodwar, which was consistent throughout my life until high school. Interestingly, the music in Pac Man World 2 also hits much harder for me than Broodwar's soundtrack in terms of nostalgia. I think this might be because I spent much more time playing Broodwar compared to Pac Man World 2. This repetition of listening to the same soundtracks could have dulled my sense of nostalgia towards that game. This is contradictory to what I noted before of listening to the soundtracks over and over again, provoking a strong sense of nostalgia due to the time spent. But I wanted to note this idea either way. All of this points towards open world games. These games are built for trying to immerse you into their world. They have a giant map scattered with puzzles, quests, and you can spend countless hours walking around figuring out what the game and its open world is about. These games can feel linear, but most of them do a really good job immersing you into their breathtaking worlds and amazing soundtracks that are tied to their specific locations. Because of this, it is easy for music to trigger memories while exploring these areas or doing quests, which on paper should trigger a high degree of nostalgia when revisiting these games. For me, I tend to remember the surroundings and the music more than whatever activity I did in that area, probably because it made me feel some sort of way towards that specific location. So it makes sense that a quote-unquote open-world game such as Genshin can trigger nostalgia. I understand that Genshin Impact is a game not viewed well by a lot of people. It is first and foremost a gacha game, and it doesn't shy away from those types of practices. But this is not the point of this video. Even the open world exploration in Genshin suffers from uninteresting activities, mundane repetition, simple puzzles, or quests that are not interesting or engaging. Many games suffer from similar problems. Because their worlds are so big, developers need to put things to fill up space, whether that is meaningful content or not. Walking a silly to a shrine, or fighting monsters with the same mechanics over and over can get boring really fast. But while doing these activities, you can get lost in the surroundings and the world. That's what Genshin is for me. The story and the vibe of exploration. Genshin is still a game that tries to immerse you into its world. It worked for me, and it worked for many others. Genshin Impact helped a lot of people during the COVID pandemic. That combined with the open world gameplay it provided and the gacha system basically guarantees that you could sink hundreds of hours into the game. I often see how people talk about Genshin in those days and how different the game was. All of these differences and the time spent in between these moments create nostalgia for a lot of people. Putting it all together, Genshin came at a time where people were experiencing something drastic in their lives, which is possible condition for triggering nostalgia. Combined with distinct music and characters that get you invested into its beautiful world, it's no surprise that it evokes a strong sense of nostalgia. It seems as though nostalgia is rooted by what a person will consider their most precious moments. While wrapping up the script, I remember when I was 5 or 6, I used to draw games on pieces of paper and add little puzzles to them. There was a small tree in my backyard that I used as reference for how the levels or progression would look like. The game would get harder as you finish levels and you would climb up the tree. It's pretty abstract and can obviously be jotted down as something a kid would do in his free time. But the important point is that this idea took direct inspiration from a matching game I played as a kid. I don't feel nostalgia for this game, but it did unlock memories for me that were long forgotten. It's truly amazing that in more recent years, video games have become such a cultural phenomenon that people are more widely accepting of them, and those who spend their time playing them. They are considered a real hobby, and many who play these games have memories that are tied to them. Memories that are nonetheless real as those outside of video games. To me, it's no surprise that players can feel nostalgia towards these games or specific experiences they had while playing them. Nostalgia oftentimes comes out of nowhere, and as explored in this video, the player needs to have some sort of emotional connection with these experiences. Otherwise, it would simply be a good or bad memory. For any given video game, it's really difficult triggering nostalgia, because every player is different. So no one should try making a game just for the sense of nostalgia. Sometimes sequels of games or even movies try to cash in on that idea, but I think it's better for us to experience nostalgia as it comes naturally. That way, we will actually feel like it means something. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you. It makes me happy if someone else was actually interested in what I was saying. I just wanted to talk a little bit about this idea that I had for a couple months actually, while I was just finishing up university. This was a fun little project for me, and I hope I can find more things to yap about in the future.